Hello, welcome to the Pre-Adoption Talk. My name's Barbara Ellis and I am the Training and Behaviour Advisor here at the Newbury Dog Stress Centre. Now, a lot of the things that you're going to hear in this talk might not be new to you or they might be completely new to you. You can rest assured that we are always up to date on the most modern thinking, so please take what we say rather than what your very well-meaning neighbour or person you meet in the park may say as the truth when it comes to knowing the rescue dogs that we are rehoming with you. So, this talk is going to cover the adoption process, what you'll need to get ready, what you can expect from a rescue dog and what you can expect from us, how to read a dog's body language, how to mix your dog safely with other dogs, diet, training, how to deal with unwanted behaviour, and your legal obligations as a dog owner. So, the process. Initially, you're going to go online and apply for a dog, which you've already done. If you're shortlisted, you will then have received a call and we'll have assessed whether you're a suitable match. Then you complete this talk. After that, we'll ask you to send photos of the house and garden as well as answers to some questions which you'll find in this talk. You're also going to need to provide tenancy agreement if you're renting. If you're a homeowner, then that's not applicable. Everyone in the house is then going to need to meet the dogs. So this is a minimum of 3 visits. And sometimes we might also bring the dog to your home to visit you there if we think that they'll need that extra time to get them used to the home environment. And obviously if you have an existing dog, this is also going to include dog mixing. So it doesn't have to be everybody in the house meeting the dog every single time, but we do require a minimum of 3 visits. How many visits depends on you, and it depends on the dog and how long it takes you to form a bond and get on, understand all the training and everything else. So then the dog goes to see the vet for an okay to go and a clean bill of health, and then you do the adoption. The support you can receive from us. On the adoption, you'll receive paperwork which includes the microchip details. So we update those details into your name on adoption, but from then on it's your responsibility to keep them up to date. So if you move or you change your phone number, you'll need to let the microchip company know. We'll also give you the vet history and the dog's vaccination card. The adoption fee is £185, which includes the dog, obviously, 4 weeks of insurance, a lead and collar, and a sample of the food they're currently on. All our dogs are up to date on their worm, flea treatment and injections before they go home. You can also buy harnesses and training leads at an additional cost if you'd like them. You can speak to a member of staff when you come and meet the dog to arrange that. You will get behaviour support for life, and we'd rather you ring if there are any problems. I'd much rather hear about a growly dog than a bitey dog, so please do get in touch if you have any problems. You sign up to post-adoption support. This is an opt-in service, but they ring you after a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and then a couple of months to see how you're getting on. They are fully qualified behaviourists and trainers, and they, as I say, give you regular calls, so that's well worth signing up to. So things that you're going to need to get ready for your dog before they come home. You're going to need some beds, I say more than one. Multiple areas where they can sleep. You might want to have different beds in different rooms or sofas or chairs that they're allowed to get on. Some bowls, a water bowl and a food bowl. Think through your transportation method. So you might want to use a harness and a seat belt on the back seat. You might want to put a crate in the boot or leave the dog loose in the boot with a dog guard. We can tell you how we've been travelling your dog while they've been with us and what their preference is. Some enrichment. These are activities that are naturally enriching to your dog, help them to be calm, use sniffing, licking, chewing, things that all help to tire a dog out, keep them mentally happy. So there's a link in the email that you got to this talk with a separate video on that I highly recommend you watch, and you might want to buy a few toys from there. And then a little plan for quiet daily activities that you're going to do when the dog comes home that don't involve going out to busy places, having people around, things like that. So what you can expect from living with a rescue dog. Living in a kennel is very different to living in a house. Maybe your dog has never lived in a house before, maybe they're an ex-racing greyhound, maybe we've picked them up as a stray, we don't know their history, whether they've lived in a house before. Either way, they've never lived in your house before, and that's the key. This is a whole new environment to them, and it can be really, really stressful. So they're likely to be very overwhelmed, and it's going to take time to adapt. We normally say it takes 3 days for the stress hormones to start to leave the body. It takes 3 weeks for them to start to understand and settle into the routine and feel a little bit more comfortable, and it takes 3 months for them to really start to feel settled and to feel a lot more comfortable. Now that's best case scenario. It can take 6 months, it can take a year. If that dog's already been out to another home for 6 months to a year, and it's come back again, or it's been out to multiple homes, that's going to take even longer. Okay, so these are just things to bear in mind. What you're doing for those first 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months really, really matter. So it's going to take you longer to form a bond with the dog than it would if you just went out and bought a puppy, as I say, particularly if they've had bonds that have already been broken before. They're not necessarily going to live up to your expectations. I'd advise you to keep your expectations really low, especially if you've lost a dog recently, especially if that was an older dog. That dog and you have worked out harmony with each other. You're used to each other, you know each other's routines. Generally, dog ownership was probably fairly pleasurable by that point. It's likely to be a bit more tricky to start with this dog. You've never owned this dog before, no matter how many other dogs you've owned, you haven't had this one, and this dog's never lived with you before. So we've got a lot to get used to with each other. So keep your expectations low, and then hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised. Sometimes they have behaviour problems which can be managed but not completely solved. So sometimes that might be like resource guarding issues that need a bit of management in place, or things like prey drive with our ex-racers where they need to just wear a muzzle and be kept on a lead. And I want you to give careful consideration to handling. You're going to come hopefully sometime this week to meet your dog for the first time. You know you're coming, you know what they look like, and you know a little bit about them. They have no clue that you're coming, they know nothing about you at all. And they're going up on a normal day and suddenly everything's about to change. So just bear that in mind, and when you come, it's best to just sit and allow them to come and sniff you. And then if they approach you, you might want to just offer some touch. Once they've happily approached you a few times and they've done all their sniffing, if they approach again, we might just want to offer a gentle touch under the chin and down the chest area. We definitely don't want to come over the top of the dog. That's really scary. We don't want to pat them on the head. Don't know who invented that, but that's weird. Don't do that. So we're going to offer them a little bit of gentle touch down here, and then we're going to pause and see if they like it, because touch has got to be mutually beneficial. So we want to stroke the dog because it's cute and fluffy and we want to touch it, but do they want you to touch them? We need to find out, don't we? So we'll offer a little bit and then we'll pause, and if they kind of say, oh yeah, that was nice, do it again, we can offer a bit more. After a few seconds, pause, and if they keep going, we can give them some more. If they had a little bit and then they stopped and had maybe a partial shake or just moved away, we know that actually they had as much as they were comfortable with, and we've given them that opportunity to be able to move away. Once you've brought them home, then still think about handling. Just because they're in your home doesn't mean that they wholly trust you, know you, and feel comfortable with everything you're going to want to do to them. So think about how comfortable you'd need to be with somebody to have them say, put your coat on for you. You'd have to know them pretty well to allow them to do that, and putting a harness on the dog is probably not much different. So we kind of feel like, oh, it's a dog, it's used to wearing one, this will be okay, but actually we spend quite a lot of time in the kennels building bonds with these dogs and teaching them to be comfortable with that level of handling. So putting the harness on is quite an invasive thing. Drying their feet, massively invasive. Brushing, grooming, things like that, really quite invasive. So just always be very mindful that if we're giving the dog a fuss, they needed to have approached us and asked for it. We shouldn't be going to them and giving it. They should be coming and asking for it. And that when it comes to things like leads on, harnesses on, coats on, or drying paws and things like that, we want to keep it really basic to start with. Maybe get a bath mat by the back door if it's raining and just get them to stand on it for a bit, because that's very absorbent, so we don't need to be drying their paws throughout the winter and things like that. Just always be really mindful. How is the dog feeling about this? we're going to come on to body language in a little bit, so that'll tell you how the dog is feeling about that. And yeah, keep it really, really gentle to begin with. So, settling the dog in. We're going to take that time to build and develop a bond over the first few days above and beyond anything else. We might want to provide them with a safe haven, so a safe area in the house that's theirs that they can take themselves off to at any time. We're definitely going to keep visitors to a minimum. Just remember, they need to get to know you first, okay? And visitors can come later on. Avoid busy places on walks. Some dogs, I'm going to say most of them, are going to benefit from frequent shorter walks. Time to build up their fitness, but also time to get to know your area. It's really overwhelming being in a new area, and dogs might pull more or pant more or be a bit more hypervigilant when they're in a new and a strange place. So just taking them around the block and then a bit longer on the next one and slightly longer, and just over a few days adding 5 minutes onto the walk to get them used to the area. So, sleeping areas. Provide them with a comfortable bed, make it a positive experience. Please remind anybody in your house or visitors not to wake the dog up when it's asleep. And if you need to wake them up for any reason, use your voice and call them out. Don't go and touch them or shout or startle them into waking up. Decide whether or not you want them on the sofa. There's no issue with your dog being on the sofa unless we've specifically told you there is an issue with this dog and the sofa. So it's entirely up to you, but you do need to know before you get home how you're going to manage that. So some dogs, particularly greyhounds, where they're a bit more bony, do like raised soft sleeping areas, duvets, sofas, things like that. And we need to use prevention, not punishment. This dog may have been used to being on the furniture in a previous home, or if not, they're in a room and there's the option of the sofa, they're going to choose that because it's comfortable. So we need to prevent them having access to the room where the sofas are while we're not there if we don't want them on it. And we don't want to wait for them to get up and then tell them to get off. We want to provide much better, more comfy alternatives for them and encourage them and train them to go onto their bed. Please never, ever, ever pull the dog off by its collar. They don't know you very well yet. That's incredibly confrontational to do that. And if you came and pulled me off my bed, it's not going to go well. Even if you know me, it's not going to go well. So don't do that. Use your voice, call them off, throw a treat on the floor, make it really positive. So, thinking about the first night when they've arrived home, it's going to be stressful and confusing. They're in a new place with new people, no established routine. They may have been used to sleeping with a kennel mate. In a previous home, they may have been used to sleeping with their owner. They do sleep better with company on the whole, so you might want to consider having them in the bedroom or just outside the door with a stair gate or something, or you might want to sleep downstairs for the first couple of nights, and then you're going to gradually move them downstairs once they've settled in, or you can keep them in the bedroom as well, that's absolutely fine, or you come down, sleep on the sofa, and after a couple of nights start to leave once they're settled down. Crate training, there is a handout attached to the email that the link to this talk came in. This is a safe and secure area for them. Dogs are naturally denning animals. If they steal something, they're going to run off and hide behind the sofa. They're not going to lie out in the middle of the room and eat it. So they like to feel safe and enclosed. Not all dogs have had positive experience with crates, so do ask us if this is something that you're considering. We can let you know. It's obviously a portable bed. It needs to be big enough for them to stand up fully with their head up, turn around and lie out completely flat in. It doesn't want to be any bigger than that because then it loses the safety aspect. We're going to introduce it slowly at the dog's pace. We could use stuffed Kongs when they go in there to help them settle. We're not going to shut the door until they're comfortable settling inside, and we might like to cover it like that one is there in the picture just to make it A, look a bit nicer, and B, feel safer. You can buy fabric ones for smaller dogs as well, which are already covered. So it's not something you want to leave them in for a long period of time. 4 hours is absolutely the maximum really during the day, and then obviously overnight. If they're happy, it really helps with toilet training, because if we can shut them in there and we're somewhere where we can hear, we know when they need to be let out and we can take them out to go to the toilet and then they can go back in again. They're unlikely to get off their bed in the middle of the night for anything other than a toileting reason, so that helps. It's got to be a positive experience. It's not a jail. It's not a timeout. Okay, it's a happy place. Okay, so leaving the dog alone for the first time. You're going to do this really, really gradually. So we're starting off by getting them used to being a room away from you first. If they're still following you absolutely everywhere you go all day, they're definitely not ready for you to leave the house. And naps is another thing that kind of comes into this, that we need to be facilitating for the dogs. Dogs should actually sleep for a good 2 to 3 hour period, morning and afternoon, as well as a full night's sleep. So if they're following you around the house every time you move, then we're not really facilitating that sleep properly either. So we want to get into a really good structured routine. So we're going to get the dog, we get up, they go out to the toilet, they come in, they eat breakfast, they go for a walk, whatever order that happens. Maybe they do a bit of play in the garden for some of that, and then it's nap time. Okay, and they're gonna settle down and have a nap. That's probably the time you'd start to try moving around or leaving once they're established in that routine. So give it a few weeks for them to understand that routine. There are videos that we can send you if you need help with how to train them to stay in a room by themselves comfortably. But that's the time where they would normally sleep and settle, where you can think about going out, and the same in the afternoon. So it's not a time schedule, it's a routine to make life very predictable for your dog, so they know what's about to happen when. So then once we go, we'd maybe leave them with something to do. There we are, pictures of some things to do, and then pop out. You can buy cameras fairly cheaply on Amazon that you can go out and watch on your phone on an app, so that you can see what they're doing. Because if you look at this little picture, this little pug here, he's not destroying anything or barking or weeing, but he's not happy being left. So really, really important that we know what the dog's doing while we go out. So a camera is a good idea. Give them something to do, and hopefully they'll be settled in their routine and they'll hopefully have a nap. But if you have any problems with this at all, do give us a call. So this is only for people that have already got an existing dog, so we'll whiz through it a little bit. Before you bring the dog home, pick up everything apart from the water bowl. I'd probably give them a couple of water bowls, okay, but pick up all the toys and other things like that. Make sure that we've got alternative beds for each dog, so maybe 2 dogs, 3 beds, so that they can pick and choose which one. They're a bit like toddlers, they like to have what the other one's got, and we're going to feed them separately as well. So when you come to take your dog home, don't bring your existing dog with you, otherwise they've got to squish up together in the car. So when you bring your dog home, take them for a walk somewhere on neutral territory, and then into the garden, and then into the house. Consider things that are important to the dog, and this could be you. You are a resource. You provide food, you provide fuss and attention. So it could be that your dog's used to being up here, and as the other dog comes in for a fuss, this one starts to growl and things like that. So just think about resources. So toys, food, water, beds, access to you. These are all resources that are important to your dog, and you just need to be watching their body language very carefully around those things until you know how they feel about sharing. They may not be best friends right away, okay? It may take time. So you know that your dog's about to get a new brother or sister, but your dog doesn't know, and you've chosen it for them. So give them time to adjust and get used to it. So house training. Your dog may well have been house trained before it came to us. It may be house trained with us. It's unlikely. We do leave at 5 and we don't get back till 8. It's a long time then between getting them out. So they'll often toilet in their kennel. So you might need to just do a refresher and start again when you get home. So we're going to treat them like a puppy or a toddler, take them out for regular toilet breaks every hour, unless they're asleep. Like I said, they need to have a 2 to 3 hour nap. If they're sleeping, we don't want to wake them up. So we could set a little alarm to go off every hour to remind us that we need to take them out every hour. But if it goes off while they're asleep, just wait and remember to take them out when they wake up. So after food, after a crazy funny 5 minutes or play, after a sleep, after a drink, take them out and see if they need the toilet. Don't get in the habit of leaving the back door open and assuming the dog will take themselves to the right place. They don't yet know where the toilet is in your house, and it's your job to show them. If you leave the door open, you put the onus on the dog to know what they're doing, and you take the onus off yourself to watch the dog really, really carefully. So don't get in the habit of leaving the back door open. If you've got multiple people in the house, you all need to be watching the dog. I think it's easy for people with several people in the house to assume that somebody's watching the dog, and in reality nobody's actually watching the dog. So when you get them home and the first time, go straight in the garden. We're going to give them a big reward for going to the toilet outside. We're going to watch them like hawks. If we find an accident somewhere and we didn't see them doing it, that's your fault because you weren't watching. All right, there's no other way about it. So you need to be watching that dog all the time. So warning signs would be sniffing in circles, particularly for a poo, and that gets a bit tighter. Male dogs will sniff along the thing they're going to pee on. Little bits of toileting, so dogs where they're going around and just urinating a little bit on purpose, that tends to be scent marking, and that's something that dogs do when they're feeling uncomfortable in an area. They want to make it smell like them to make it more familiar. So if they're constantly scent marking in certain places, you could get a little flannel and rub it on them so that it smells of them, and then put that in those areas, so then when they get to those areas it already smells like them and they don't feel the need to urinate on it. But that's not a full-on wee, that's just those little drips that they let out, and there's nothing naughty about that at all. That is just them feeling really anxious. So if you start shouting at them or anything like that, you're going to make the problem a lot worse. So, you know, when we're training toddlers how to toilet, we don't shout at them when they get it wrong. So we don't want to damage the relationship we're working so hard to build here with this new dog. So just whoopsie daisies, if you catch them going, try and whisk them outside. Quick, let's go. Make it really positive and go outside. If you didn't see it, just that's your fault. Lock the dog somewhere else and clean it up nicely, and take a deep breath and think, I must watch more carefully next time. So this is the most important part now, looking at how to read a dog's body language. So in that first picture we can see there, you can see the whites of the dog's eyes. Now you shouldn't really be able to see the whites of dog's eyes because their irises fill up the whole eye socket. So they'll only do this if they're worried. Maybe they're looking away and avoiding you and you can see it sideways. Maybe they're guarding something and watching the threat. Or maybe they're just looking a bit worried like he is there and trying to avoid eye contact. So he's also lifting his little paw up. There are two types of paw lift, ears back, whale eye, worried dog, or there's the stalk, squirrel. Totally different. Ears would be up, tail would be erect, everything would be forward, and there'd usually be a squirrel or something that they're staring at. So a paw lift in any other context is usually the dog feeling very worried and vulnerable. You've then got a big yawn, so this tends to be quite over exaggerated, so oh, something like that, and the tongue comes right out. That's a bit like a sigh for humans, so trying to get a big intake of oxygen to help us calm down. So it doesn't always mean they're really uncomfortable. They can do it when they've got over aroused and overexcited and they're trying to calm themselves down. They can obviously yawn when they're tired. Usually that would be before they curl up and fall asleep, or when they stretch when they wake up. So outside of those two contexts, the yawn is the dog trying to calm itself down. So he might have done a paw lift, his eyes might have looked away, might have turned his head, and then you might do a big yawn. That's your dog saying, I'm really uncomfortable in this situation, please get me out of it. Sniffing, that's a really tricky one because dogs sniff for all sorts of reasons, but it's generally quite out of context. So maybe they were plodding along quite happily and then they suddenly see another dog approach and they suddenly start sniffing the floor. That would be like, it's a bit more thought through, but if somebody approaches you in town with a clipboard and they try and talk to you, and you might just sort of get your phone out, pretend to be chatting away on the phone so that you don't have to interact with that person. So sometimes dogs will suddenly start sniffing the floor when they weren't even thinking about it beforehand, to avoid interacting with something else. So maybe you've just taken them to the groomers, or you've gone into the vet, or you've just seen another dog or a person's approaching. They suddenly start sniffing the floor. They're saying, oh, I'm a bit awkward about that. A head turn there on the last one on the top line, that means the same in human as it does in dog. So you're making me awkward, don't want to talk to you. There we got a tongue flick on the next line down. So these are like fidget signs. So maybe if I'm feeling nervous, you might see me kind of playing with my hair. I might have a little scratch, I might fiddle with my jewellery or my zip, you know, just get a bit fidgety and awkward if I'm feeling uncomfortable. So tongue flicks, it's the same for the dog. Now if I'm holding food and he's licking his lips, it's because there's food around. So in the absence of food, and probably in the presence of some of the other ones that we've mentioned, head turns, eyes looking the other way, scratching, we might see some lip licks as well. Scratching is obviously on there as well. The dog might just suddenly start scratching when they're feeling quite stressed. And then in the middle there we've got the ears back, tail tucked, body very withdrawn. Often they'll kind of like, they might even approach you but leave their back legs behind so they can make a hasty retreat if they need to. So these are all little things that help us to know if the dog is feeling uncomfortable. Things to look out for when you come to meet the dog, and if you tell the member of staff that you've seen it, they will be super happy and excited that you've noticed. So if we ignore all of these little subtle signs that a dog's not comfortable, they may feel the need to escalate. So if I've shown you really uncomfortable body language on your approach to me and you continue to approach me, I might need to move away. Or if I can't move away, I might need to ask you to go away or tell you that I don't like it. And the only way a dog has to do that is by changing their body language into this sort of forward stance. So if the running away is not an option, and bear in mind that we've got the dog in an indoor environment or on a lead, the running away options are quite limited. They may kind of try and make you go away and create some distance that way. So we might see everything come a bit more forward. We might see some growling, some showing of the teeth, some snapping, or some actual biting. So that's the dog saying, no, I'm really, really uncomfortable. Seriously, move away. I don't like it. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is not bad behaviour. That dog has very clearly exhibited they're uncomfortable and they don't like something, and they're okay and they're entitled to express that. A growly dog is actually a very polite dog. It could be biting you. It's growling. It's saying, I really don't like this. Please back off. So tuck tail, then we've got his tail positions here. Tuck tail is obviously very worried and fearful. So a neutral tail should kind of form a J shape. High and rigid tail that we've got there is usually an aroused dog, so he's probably watching something. He might be feeling very uncomfortable and keeping everything very erect and stiff. If a dog's meeting another dog and their tail's like that, that's probably not a very polite greeting, and the other dog might take exception to it. And then there's lots of different tail wagging as well. We could have a kind of like proper swishy, clear the coffee table, a helicopter, super happy. Some spaniels will wiggle their whole body when they're excited. So a stiff, slow wag is usually a bit of a warning. Low and quick is quite worried. And any sort of very slow and deliberate tail wags you want to be very cautious with. So I'm going to show you some videos in the next few slides. I want you to just look out for the things I've shown you here. I'm just going to watch it through first and see what you think, and then we're going to re-watch it again and I'm going to tell you what we were looking out for. Here we go. Super. So we're going to watch that again. So he's turning his head away. We're behind the camera. He's panting, which is one that we don't mention very much, so I'll talk to you about that in just a second. And then you can see the whites of his eyes really, really, really clearly. He's also got a slightly furrowed brow and his ears are pulled back. Panting is a really excellent one to notice. Two questions to really ask. Has my dog just done a lot of exercise and is it hot? If neither of those apply, there's another reason why the dog is panting. And panting is an increased breathing rate, which means that also the heart rate is probably increased as well. And if you can think that you haven't done exercise but you can't breathe, you're probably panicking. Okay, if your breathing is like that, you can't catch your breath, then something else is wrong. Now this dog, you can see quite a lot of tension. His mouth is forming like a C shape and his tongue is not lolling out. He's not hot and he's not just done any exercise. So we know that he's really, really quite stressed. It can also be a sign of pain. So if the dog was kind of hunched or head low and every time it starts exercising it starts panting, then it's probably there's some pain causing that as well somewhere. A hot pant, the dog will usually be led down because they're hot and they're tired, and their tongue will loll out completely and the mouth will be totally wide open, rather than a bit more laboured like that. So there we are, lots of little stress things: looking away, whale eye, the panting, see if it comes up, and head turn as well. What's this one?
Right. Right.
Okay, so he's come over all raggy. Oh dear, gone backwards. And then he sat down. He's doing lots of lip licking. You see that? He's turned his head away from her, obviously looking towards us, but he's turned away from her. His ears are right back, and he's kind of going little bit. If you miss any of this, you can always rewind this yourself. Benefit of being on a video. So he's come over excited and happy, but he's really awkward with the touching. But he's put himself in that situation. So very often we can think, well, he came over and he was happy, but actually he's telling us he's not very comfortable with the touching there. Nice loud car going past there. Okay, first thing to notice, the thing that everybody misses. The dog is standing still on a walk. It's not moving, that's a freeze. See the ears going? Panting starts. Big yawn. Carries on panting, now able to walk. So she could hear it approaching, she stopped moving, panic, stay still. Right, and then she can hear it coming. You can see the ears moving and moving. She's like, oh my gosh, a car's coming. Oh my gosh. You see the breathing starts to increase, which means the heart rate is also increased. The big yawn. That was really stressful. So she's just essentially been through a panic attack because the car went past. If we didn't know what we were looking for, we could just look at that and think it was just a dog on a walk, and we'd completely miss the fact that she really is not comfortable around cars. Also hypervigilant. Yeah, she's not really sniffing. That's quite key. A dog that's on a walk should be engaging with the environment, we call it, so sniffing or interacting with things around the area, sniffing the trees, looking at people going past it. But one that's kind of a bit sort of like, who's there, what's this, you know, really busy, looking at everything, listening to everything all the time. That's not relaxing. That's not a good walk. So really important things to watch out for when you're outside. Okay, so let's play it again. So he's watching the person behind the camera. When a dog is uncomfortable, they will watch the thing that they're frightened of or threatened by. So it's not the other dog, he's feeling threatened by the owner here. So lots of lip licking, keeping the head low over the item, which is a sausage roll. Growl. Teeth. So it's escalating. He started off by not eating. That's quite key. So if they're guarding something, they've stopped eating. So if you have approached a dog and he's and as you approach he stops, that means he's not comfortable eating with you that close. So that's your first warning sign, not eating it. They might then keep their head really low over it. This is mine. And they're going to stare right at you. Or they keep their attention, or it might be the other dog, keep their attention on the thing they're guarding it from. And then if you don't back off, that's where it's going to escalate. So it might turn into a growl, might turn into a snap. Certainly if you were to put your hand in there, I think you would probably get bitten. So it matters little how the dog got hold of this item. When a dog is guarding something, they've already got possession of it. And if in human law possession is 9/10 of the law, then in dog law is 100%. Absolutely. If they've got it, it's theirs, they want to retain possession of it. So that wasn't his sausage roll at the start of the day. It is his sausage roll now because he's got it. So whilst you might feel like, well, you've stolen it, it's not yours, you should give it back, that's naughty, it's just a dog. In his world, it's his sausage roll because he's got it and he wants to keep it. And actually, if anybody approaches, he's going to say, back off, I've got this now, it's mine, all right? And that's okay. We have, unfortunately, there's just one of those things in life where we've accidentally left something where the dog can get it, they've decided it's theirs. We either need to swap it out, and good luck finding something better than a sausage roll at this point, or just leave them to it and think, whoopsie daisies, I should not have left that where the dog could steal it, but it's gone now. He's got it. Okay, I know that goes against a lot of what people's thinking is, but that's where a dog is coming from. I've got it and I want to keep it. Okay, like you would if you've been given something, you want to keep it. We'll come on to food guarding again later because it is a really interesting one, but we either have to leave him well alone or offer him something better to swap it out. But nobody's going to eat that sausage roll now anyway, let's be honest, so we might as well just leave him to it. So he had his head very low over it, his ears back, he was stopped eating, so he wasn't eating when he saw us coming closer. The really hard fixed stare, not moving very much either, escalated to a growl and showing teeth when approached. Okay, let's watch this one again. We're looking at the hackles there in the middle, so just above the shoulder blades and slightly up the neck, and also often at the base of the tail as well. You'll get some. And obviously we've got barking, growling. We've got a waggy tail, so again, it's just to show you that a waggy tail isn't always a happy dog. So the hackles are a bit like goosebumps on a person. People often say, oh, he had his hackles up, he was being aggressive. They don't do it on purpose. They have no control over their hackles. It's a physiological response to an emotion. So if I say to you now, give yourself goosebumps, you can't physically make your hair stand up on your arms, the back of your neck or anywhere else. So nor can a dog either. But if you hear a nice piece of music, or you get excited, or you're a bit cold, or you're afraid, your goosebumps might go up by themselves. So it's the same for dogs. Sometimes it'll be excitement, more often than not hackles are fear. So this dog is frightened. Again, they're watching the thing they're frightened of, which is a bunch of cows in the next field. She's got her ears back, quite a tense mouth here with the barking. Hackles are up, everything's quite forward. Her option to run away is gone because she's on the lead, so she's trying to make them go away. Row, 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 row. Shoo, 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 go away, you're scary. And yet the tail is wagging at the same time. But this is not a happy dog. Okay, lastly.
Good boy.
So this is probably one of the most important things. So he's walking along, he's hypervigilant, yeah? He's looking up, he's watching.
Good
Has
boy.
a big shake, nose to tail, as if he's wet, but he's not. And now he suddenly starts sniffing, going back to engaging in the environment again. So we call that one a shake off. Top points if you can remember that on all your meets. So if the dog has just got out the bath and they shake, or they've fallen in the river and they shake, or you've just taken their harness off and they shake, that's them kind of putting their hair back into place, getting rid of all the water. In the absence of those things, if they shake like that from head to tail, then it's a bit like a shudder. So perhaps you go out for a drive and a car pulls out in front of you suddenly, and you swerve and you beep and you're really stressed and you're left quite shaken. Within a couple of minutes you might kind of and have a little shudder. You might even have more than one if it was really scary. And until that shudder happens, you're tense, you might be shaking, you're going to be hypervigilant, you're going to be super sensitive to every car that pulls up, you're on edge, so to say. It's the same for dogs. Something stressful happens and they're all hypervigilant and stressed and unable to cope, and then within a couple of minutes they might have a shake off, and then they're able to start to calm down and relax, and again he could go back to sniffing and to being a little bit more normal in his body language. They're really important to notice because whatever happened just before that caused that stress. So in this instance, I think he'd just seen a deer go past and he's like, oh my gosh, I want to go and chase it. It's really, really exciting. It could be another dog's come up and sniffed them and they felt uncomfortable with it, and as they move off, they have a shake off. Could be that you've just stroked them and they found the touch a little bit awkward and they move away and have a shake off. The car, basically everything that's just happened previous to this slide, all of those dogs now need a shake off to recover from those events that they've been through. So if you want to rewind and have a look again, please feel free. But they all need a shake off in order to calm down and recover. Now, some dogs can't do it out and about. They need to wait until they get home, and then you might find they have 6 or 7 once they get home. Some dogs can do it quite quickly after the event. The quicker it is after the event, the better, because they're not on edge for too long. But you want to be kind of counting them, because it's not really normal for them to have a lot. So if you think about a car journey that invoked 7 shudder-inducing experiences for you, that was a really bad car journey. Something's probably up with your driving somewhere, or everybody else is today. So a walk that's induced 7 shake-offs for a dog has been a really stressful walk. Most well-adjusted dogs probably wouldn't have very many at all on a walk, 1 or 2 at most. So notice them, because your dog is finding things in the environment uncomfortable, and hopefully they'll start to reduce, and it should teach you what sort of things your dog needs help with in terms of what triggers that we need to avoid, or what things need a bit of work. So I've just mentioned triggers. Triggers are a thing that cause you stress. So for your dog, it could be, here we've got large dog, pats on the head and skateboarders, and each of those maybe causes your dog a different amount of stress. So one might invoke a head turn, one might invoke a bit of a yawn and awkwardness, and the third one might involve some hackles and avoidance behaviours. But if they all happen at once, it can lead to a bite occurring. And we generally call this like a threshold. So if a dog is able to cope with something, they should be under threshold. In this area, they can take treats, respond to their name, and perform some basic, maybe a sit, something that they've practiced well. Over this line, they can't respond to their name, can't take a treat, they're too worried. So if right now there was a large spider behind me on the wall and you were offering me a Mars bar, I wouldn't be able to take it because that's too scary. Whereas ordinarily I'd love one. So with, maybe you might have a really bad day one day, you wake up late, you burn your toast, spill your coffee all over yourself, you're late for work because there's traffic, you get a row off the boss, really stressful day, and then you come home and the other half mentions the state of the kitchen with the coffee and the toast, and you just explode. So it's the same for dogs. It all kind of adds up. If they haven't had time between each stressful event to calm down, re-engage with the environment, come home, you have that adrenaline leave the body, and they keep going into more stressful situations and again and again and again, it can add up, and they can either then get over threshold where they just can't respond to you enough, or their reaction is likely to be a lot more extreme, or they might then bite. So we've got their bite might occur over this level. So it's really important on any given day to think about what situations your dog has been put in, how they're feeling. Has there been a thunderstorm overnight? Are they already on edge, and are they already stressed, and what else can they cope with in their day? So looking at socializing with other dogs here, we need to ask ourselves, is it appropriate? Okay, do both these dogs want to interact? That's our really key question. I've taught you to read dog body language, read both dogs' body language. Do both these dogs actually want to interact? Are they both showing open and positive body language towards each other? If they are, and with the consent of the other owner, we're going to try and get them to meet nose to bottom. They will do it naturally, but very often with lead tension they end up coming in head on, and that's really not ideal. They should be nose to bottom. Sometimes we can facilitate that if we've got a dog that's okay with food and very well adjusted, and your dog is perhaps a bit nervous. You could feed the other dog and allow your dog then to come around and sniff their bottom, provided they're okay with that. We're trying to keep our leads as loose as possible to allow them to exhibit normal body language. We're going to obviously read their body language, and we're going to then think about the 3-second rule. If you think about meeting a stranger and you have a handshake, after 3 seconds, that gets a bit weird and awkward. And a hug, totally inappropriate. So if another dog has bounced up to your dog right in the face and is all over them, that's a hug, that's inappropriate. But if they've gone nose to bottom and are having a polite sniff, after 3 seconds, bit weird, bit awkward, need to call them away. They can have another nose to bottom sniff. You could have more than one handshake at the beginning, end of conversation. That wouldn't be too strange, but that handshake going on that long gets a bit weird. So we want to let them sniff the other dog's body language for other dog's bottom for approximately 3 seconds, call them away, then we could repeat if necessary. Generally speaking, they've found out everything they want to know, and then we're just going to parallel walk. The idea really of socialization is a bit of a Western concept. We think that dogs should be able to go up to absolutely every dog and play that's not normal. So for every dog they meet, there may be a few that they have a quick sniff and move on, quick sniff and move on. There may be some they completely avoid because they make each other feel awkward. And there may be one or two that they know really well that they play with. But a dog does really generally need to know a dog very well to play with it, as do you. If you're going to stop and have a conversation with somebody on a walk, it's probably because you know them. Otherwise, it might be a quick morning and move on. So think about different breeds and their play styles, because that's important when you're choosing friends for your dog. And be considerate of other owners. It might be that you are trying really hard to stay over here and avoid other dogs because we've told you your dog is really nervous and somebody's Labrador comes charging over and they shout, "Oh, he's fine, he's friendly." Well, that's not okay, so don't be that owner. So what do you do if you're in that situation? There's a couple of things. You could try throwing food at it to get yourself away. If it's a small dog, by all means, and it's safe to do so, pick it up. If it's, if he's barking and lunging at the other dog, don't pick it up because he might accidentally redirect onto you. But if he's feeling like that's the safest thing to do, you could pick them up to rescue them from that situation. But essentially distance is what you want to do. So you need to take whatever means you can to get distance. You can politely call to them, "Could you please put your dog on its lead," or "Call your dog away because mine is a bit nervous." You've got your dog on the lead, so all is good. You're in the right there. Throw some food at the other dog. You can throw a toy, and then quick, get out of the way and try and move away while they call their dog back. So letting your dog off lead. We're going to keep our dog on the lead until we have a 100% recall in an enclosed area. Right? This can take months. Some dogs it will never happen. But until you have got a 100% recall in an enclosed area, you're not going to let them off outside of that area. So we need to make sure they get enough exercise in other ways. We could try running with the dog, playing with the dog. We can hire enclosed fields. There's a website that allows you to go, if you just Google it, enclosed fields, dog walking fields. You'll find websites that advertise private people that have private fields that let them out to dog walkers. That's a really good idea. So your recall, you're going to start in a quiet area. So that could be the house and the garden. You could call them between the two. So one of you in the house, one of you in the garden, call them backwards and forwards for fun. And then once we get to being outside in the enclosed area or even outside of that, once we've progressed, we're going to use a harness on the dog and a long line. Now that's not a flexi lead, that's just a very, very long normal lead. And the idea of it is that it trails on the floor. You can buy them up to about 50 feet long. We can show you them at the centre if you ask us to show you how to use a long line. And it trails on the floor and you now have a 50-foot long dog. So if you see another dog coming or a distraction or they're about to go and roll in something, you can just pick the lead up and we can then move them on without having to try and catch or control this small dog. So for the times when recall might fail, we've got that extra resource should we need it. Practice, 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 and make it really good fun. So call the dog all the time, even when you don't need them. If you only wait until you do need them, you're making recall pretty rubbish. So I don't want you to roll in poo, I don't want you to go and see that dog, I don't want you to XYZ. Actually, just call them all the time for fun, and then when you do need them, there's a fighting chance it might work. Don't punish a delayed recall. It's very tempting, especially if they've just nicked somebody's sandwich, jumped up on someone's white trousers, I don't know, made somebody's little child cry. It can be really, really embarrassing that they're not coming back. So you let them off in that situation. Okay, so you've given them the choice. You've taken off the lead, go away, go and have fun, but come back when I call you. And then you're going to punish them for making bad choices that were bad in your book, not in their book. I expect they've had a lovely time doing all those things that have really embarrassed you. So they've gone away, they've made all their choices. There were poor choices in your book. They've then chosen to come back and you're really cross because you're frustrated. Well, then coming back now is rubbish, isn't it? Next time they're given a choice, they'll just stick to doing all the other things and not coming back. So that's why we're not letting them off until we've got 100% recall, so that we know they are reliably coming back every time we call them. So around livestock, farmers obviously carry guns and are allowed to shoot dogs if they are worrying their livestock. So it's just not worth it. Always keep them on a lead around livestock. So thinking about what we're going to feed them, we're going to feed them twice a day unless we tell you we're feeding them 3 times a day. We're going to feed them in a quiet area. Never take food away while your dog is eating. You wouldn't like it. Okay, so if you're in a restaurant and someone comes along, like the waiter comes past and keeps pinching a chip every time he comes past, you're going to start to change your body language and how you feel when you see him coming. You might move your plate out of the way as he comes. So same, people say, oh, I'm going to take his food away to make sure he doesn't resource guard. Well, that teaches him to resource guard, because he didn't have a reason to guard his bowl until you started taking it away. So actually, if the waiter comes past and every time he goes past he adds a chip to my plate, well, that's going to change things significantly. I see him coming, I'm very happy, my body language is open about the plate, he can keep adding chips. So it could be that we just sit near the bowl and we put some food in, and as he finishes eating we add a bit more and we add a bit more, and now he's comfortable with me being near his food bowl, which is brilliant. If we're rehoming you with a dog that has resource guarding issues, ignore all of that and follow the advice that we give you, because it'll be specific to the dog. Food choice are your friends. So as I said, there's a link to a enrichment video. Please do watch that, because there's lots of different ways that you can really help them to use their brain when feeding them rather than just giving them a bowl. How much you're going to feed your dog, we're going to give you a guide on what we feed the dog, but hopefully you're going to walk it a bit more than we do, so you may need to increase that at some point. Now, the food manufacturer, you can change the food that they're on. They're coming home on Wainwright's. Avoid anything that's different colours, because that tends to have all sorts of numbers and additives in it that aren't good. So you can change the food, take 2 weeks to wean them over into whatever it is you want to feed them, and then treat the feeding guide as a guide. They want you to feed your dog as much as possible, so it tends to be a little bit exaggerated. It doesn't take into account really the age and the metabolism, the exercise level of the dog. So we also can tell you how much the dog weighs now, but your dog might be overweight or underweight when they come home from us. So we're looking for body condition. So when we stroke the dog along the side, we should be able to feel its ribs by stroking very, very gently. We shouldn't have to kind of feel around to try and find the ribs. On a sight hound, we're going to be able to see them and 3 bumps of the spine at the top, but on any other dogs, we don't want to see their spine. We should see a nice tuck from the ribs up to the hips, and looking down from the top, it should go in from the ribs to the hips as well. It should be a good waistline there. Really, really key to keep your dog in good physical condition. As they age, you may need to decrease the food. If they're on bed rest because of an operation, they're going to need to decrease the food. If you're going on a hiking holiday, you're going to need to increase the food. It'll fluctuate depending on your lifestyle. So looking into training. We might want to find a class with Dog School or the Association of Pet Dog Trainers. So that's apdt.co.uk, or the Trust Dog School website is there too. Dog School is a training subsidiary of Dogs Trust. We're all assessed by APDT as an organisation, and they have independent trainers as well. Beware of rogue trainers. So there's nothing to stop you listening to this talk now and thinking, wow, I've learned so much, I'm going to go and set up as a dog trainer. Nothing to stop you doing that, because it's an unregulated industry. So there are plenty of dog trainers out there with no qualifications whatsoever. So a lot of people are banned about the dominance theory. I'm sure you've heard of it, that dogs are essentially wolves and therefore we need to be the alpha. That was something that came about in the 70s by a guy who went around, got a load of wolves and put them in an enclosure together, watched them, and came out with dominance theory. He then later in the 90s went out and watched them in the wild, because he decided that what he'd done was a bit manufactured. And in the wild, packs are families, so it's a pair, a male and a female, and babies. So there's no alpha per se, it's parents and children. And in fact, we don't really know whether dogs came from wolves, but they are now fully domesticated creatures, very far removed from that, and the whole dominance theory was disproven by himself in the 90s. Sadly, it had already entered the dog training world, and a lot of people, even still now on television, subscribe to it. But there's nothing that says that it's correct, and in fact, it can damage and destroy the relationship. It stops you looking for the actual cause. I've been out to see dogs that are growling and being alpha rolled and bitten and pinned and all kinds of weird things that people do to dogs in the name of dominating them, and actually the dog's been in pain somewhere and the owner's just not seen it and assumed the dog is being dominant and has caused no end of further issues. So do take anything you hear along those lines with a huge pinch of salt. So the handouts are attached to the email with specific issues. So we've got crate training, house training, leaving the dog alone, all sorts. So go and have a read on any that you think that you might need for that. And if you need any training, have a look at those 2 websites at the top there. Oh, when you're training, high value treats: cheese, meat, fish, hot dogs, liver paste. Squeezy cheese is good. Primula comes in a tube, so you don't get dirty fingers. You can squeeze out a pea-sized amount. Same with liver paste. Hot dogs, I cut them lengthways, and again lengthways. So then I chop it, and I've got quarters, which means that I can give a lot more with a lot less calories, especially for small dogs. So I keep telling you, oh, we're not allowed to do this, this, and that, and shout at the dog. So what do we do if we're getting some behaviour that we don't like? So I want you to think about what naughty behaviour actually is. So it's usually something the dog is doing that you would rather it didn't. So it's something the dog does instinctively: barking, digging, eating, chewing, holding, guarding, chasing. These aren't things we have to teach the dog to do. They come instinctively and are more prevalent in some breeds than others. So I want you to have a think about what your dog was bred for originally and why you might see some of these traits in the home. Because if you come to me with a greyhound and say he's been trained to see squirrels, I'm not really going to be surprised. Or the collie is trying to round up, the ducks next door, not going to be surprised again. So have a little think about what the dog's bred for, and then we can think through some of the problems and address them. So we're going to call it unwanted behaviour because it's not naughty, it's just the dog being a dog in a way that you find inappropriate, or your neighbours find inappropriate, somebody finds inappropriate. So then we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions. What's the dog getting out of the behaviour? What can I do to manage it and stop the behaviour getting rewarded? What do I want the dog to do instead, and how am I going to train it? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I want you to answer these questions, and then we'll go through it. So jumping up, what's the dog getting out of this behaviour? Generally speaking, attention. Could be food, if we're coming down with the food and they're jumping to meet us. It could be that they're feeling anxious and overwhelmed and they're jumping up looking for some reassurance. So how can I manage it to stop them getting that rewarded? I can make sure I don't reward them for jumping up. So make sure I'm not actually giving them fuss when they do jump up. That includes if I'm sitting down and they're jumping up, because they're still jumping up no matter what position I'm in. Can I stop other people from rewarding that? It's a tricky one, isn't it? When people come to the house with a prolific jumper upper, I tend to have a sign on the door that says, please only stroke the dog when it's sitting, or something like that. Manage the visitor's expectation, because it's not enough to say, please don't let him jump up, because that means different things to different people. Your one friend might whack them on the nose, another one might fold their arms and turn their back, third one might shout at them. What do you mean, don't let the dog jump up? So only stroke the dog when they're sitting manages everybody's expectations then of what to do. And what do I want the dog to do instead? That's really key, isn't it? The dog needs to jump up. There's a need there. It wants your attention. It needs reassurance. It's trying to get the food. And how am I going to train that? Some people train the dog to sit instead. So when they get excited, we ask for a sit and then we give them a fuss. For a lot of dogs, that's too static, particularly if you've just come home and they're all fluid and excited. So for some dogs, we can train them to pick up a toy instead, which they then wiggle around, and that, they can chomp on it, and that helps relieve some of that excitement that they feel. We've got a small dog, so we've trained her to jump on a chair because she wants the fuss, and the other dogs are all taller. So that puts her at the same level and allows her to get as much fuss without missing out whilst not jumping up on us. So lots of little things to think about. Second one, stealing food from the kitchen side. What is the dog getting out of this behaviour? Food, absolutely, food. Simple as that. How can I manage this behaviour to stop the dog getting the behaviour rewarded? A really simple answer to that, isn't it? Just don't leave food on the kitchen side. If the food is there and the dog steals it, it's going to do it again. If you walk past a vending machine and accidentally bump into it and a chocolate bar comes out, guarantee you'll try it again. So you need to not leave the food on the kitchen side. What do I want the dog to do instead? How will I train it? Well, there we have a nice picture of a dog learning a leave, which is an exercise that we can show you if it's something you want to do. But if you weren't in the room, you weren't there to do the training, and the dog's going to be left to work it out. So we're going to come on to that in just a moment, what to do when we're not in the room. So techniques such as spray collars, shock collars, rattle bottles, water sprays help to solve the owner's problem, not the dog's problem. I'm going to say barking is the most common one really for here. It's an unwanted behaviour, something the dog's doing naturally. So the dog is barking and we shake a rattle bottle or use a spray collar. So now let's just say that I don't like spiders, you've probably gathered that already, and there's a spider when I get into bed. I pull back the duvet and there's a great big tarantula there. So I start screaming, my husband's asleep, he's not happy about that, so he whacks me with a pillow or he chucks a glass of water on me or something to stop me. Well, that's great. His problem is now solved and he might think, brilliant, sorted that, and he'll go back to sleep, but my problem isn't solved. The spider is still there and now I don't like him very much either. So it's the same for dog. If he's barking, why is he barking? There's a reason for that barking, and if I just stop the barking, then I'm dealing with my problem. I'm not dealing with the dog's problem, and until I solve the dog's problem, that barking will never fully go away. It might just come out in a different way, either when you're not there or as destruction instead, or self-mutilation, some other way. I need to know why the dog is barking. So if you don't know the motivation for a behaviour, please do give us a call because we can work it out. Videos are really, really helpful for this. So if you're going to ring and say the dog's doing X, Y, Z, if you've got a video of it, that will really, really help us to be able to answer the question as to why that behaviour is happening. So if you weren't there, your dog's going to be left out to work out what it should do. This is wholly based on whether it's safe or unsafe, not right or wrong. So often people come and say, oh, he knew he'd done wrong. He was expressing appeasement behaviours, generally speaking, so head low, looking away, tongue flicks, looking guilty, all those stress things that I told you about earlier. Cowering in the corner. Doesn't mean they know they've done wrong. They just know that previously that behaviour has resulted in you behaving a certain way, and they're preempting that and trying to appease you in some way. I can guarantee you if they knew they'd done wrong, they wouldn't do it again, and they will. So if you were to perhaps try walking across some grass and there's a sign there that says please don't walk on the grass, you might be very obedient and go around it. If there's no sign there, you wouldn't hesitate. You wouldn't stop and wonder, should I walk on this grass or not? The default is that's where I need to go. It's the easiest way to go. I'm going to go across the grass. So it's pretty much the same for dogs. If you're there, you are the signpost that says don't do this. Okay, so you're there. It's kind of unsafe to go across to take this food from the kitchen side because the owner might interrupt in some way. Sometimes it's still worth it. It's absolutely safe when you're not there though. So we used to have a dog back in the days when dogs weren't allowed on the sofa, and we could leave the front door and she'd be on the sofa. As soon as she heard the key in the lock, she was back on the bed, and we think, well, she knows she shouldn't do it. She doesn't. She's learnt that when we're there it's not safe because we're going to interrupt that behaviour, whereas when we're away it's lovely and it's the comfiest place to sleep. There's no guilt involved in that at all. Dogs are not moral beings. They're just dogs that just do doggy things because it's the comfiest, the tastiest, the best thing that they want to do in that moment with those decisions. So moving on to the end now, your basic legal obligations as the new dog's owner. Your dog must wear a collar and tag in a public place, a metal tag with your postcode and phone number, and I would make that your mobile phone number because obviously you're not going to sit at home if you lose the dog waiting for a phone call. You must keep them under control in public places, which includes wearing a muzzle if we've advised that. You obviously need to pick up their poo. You need to keep their chip details up to date if anything changes, and you must secure them during car travel. So that brings us to the end of the talk. Hopefully you found all the answers to the questions within this, and if you can send that back to us along with the photos of your house and garden, we'll move on to getting you to meet your new dog. Thank you very much.